morning. More than anything else, these are the kind of days I feel like we were made for. That this is why Soccer Morning exists. What's going to happen on today's program. Jonathan Tannenwald, the goalkeeper on Twitter, a man who works at Philly.com and has been covering Philadelphia soccer. The Philadelphia Union, since their inception, has some pretty explosive things to tell us regarding the lawsuit. Actually, regarding the allegations made against Peter Novak in response to a lawsuit that Peter Novak filed against the Philadelphia Union for wrongful termination back in 2012. I know what you're thinking. It's 2016. Yes, that's how long these things take. Lots of discovery, lots of background here. We'll get into those allegations and what chance Peter Novak's lawsuit actually has with Jonathan Tannenwald in a couple of minutes. We'll also have a couple of details in the news, which I will get to momentarily. Also on this program, Brendan Doherty, a man who writes at Bent Musket over at SB Nation. He's from Rochester, New York. He also does a show called the USL Show that covers that particular league, and we have some pretty explosive stuff out of USL today as the Rochester Rhinos ownership has been stripped of their franchise rights as USL scrambles to find a new ownership group for one of the legacy teams in that league. The Rochester Rhinos go back quite a ways in American soccer terms, and they are the last team not in MLS to win the U.S. Open Cup back in 1999. There was actually a brief period of time where Rochester, New York was a serious MLS expansion candidate. We'll come to the situation with the ownership of the Rhinos and what's next for that team with Brendan Doherty at 9:40 a.m. Eastern. So there you go. Just so you know, first Jonathan Tannenwald, then Brendan Doherty. Two big American soccer stories. Let's dive in to the news here. These are going to lead the way. USL takes control of the Rochester Rhinos, begins search for a new owner. Rochester, the last non-MLS team to win the Open Cup in 99, as I said. USL Chief Marketing Officer Tom Veet, who, by the way, it might be, is it Veet? Are we sure about the pronunciation? I'll check on that. He's going to be on the SiriusXM show a little bit later on today. So if you have SiriusXM, be looking out for that. He flew into Rochester to work on a deal to get the team transferred over to somebody else to find a new ownership group. The USL terminated the franchise agreement after the city of Rochester terminated owner Rob Clark's lease on the stadium due to past due rent and tax bills. Basically, the city said, we're looking out for the taxpayer. We can't have a lease with somebody who's not paying these bills. Meanwhile, owner Rob Clark, a banker from Utica, has said that he's been running at a significant loss with this team. The finances of lower division soccer in the United States rearing its ugly head once again. Moving on to that other big story. Details Peter Novak's time with the Philadelphia Union have come to light as part of the lawsuit against the team for wrongful termination. Jonathan Tannenwald tweeted several pages of those allegations of that lawsuit last night on his Twitter feed at The Goalkeeper. I highly suggest you go and read this stuff for yourself. We will review as much of it as we can. These allegations of what went on behind the scenes during Novak's tenure are pretty inflammatory. Allegations including incidents of hazing, denying the existence of concussions, forcing injured players to participate in fitness training. It goes on and on and on. Novak was fired in 2012. Again, the issue here isn't, if you're wondering, okay, well, how can a coach sue for wrongful termination? If the union had said, well, you're not doing a good enough job as the coach and we're not winning games, I imagine this might not be an issue. Unfortunately, the union lined up all of these allegations against Novak, said he violated several terms of the CBA, MLS rules, etc., which led to his termination, and then did not give him an opportunity to respond or something to that effect. Again, we'll get into this with Jonathan Tannenwald momentarily. The U.S. men's national team January camp has been changed at the behest of a number of veteran players. This is per Grant Wall at Planet Football at SportsIllustrated.com. The camp originally included 33 days and a week-long fitness program to start out. Players were not happy about this idea, and the federation responded. They shortened the camp. Now several players who originally were on Klinsman's preliminary list of 36 look like they will not be involved at all, including Clint Dempsey, Nick Raimondo, Graham Zusi, Kyle Beckerman, Brad Evans, Chris Wondolowski, and Omar Gonzalez. Players also, just a point of reference here, are only paid for the friendlies that happen at the end of the camp and only then if they make the game day roster. So they get a small per diem for being in camp, but don't get paid for being there for as much as 20, 25 days. Only get paid if they make the game day roster. I can see why there might be some grumbling. Capital One Cup semifinal first leg action yesterday. Jordan, is it eBay? That's his name. Jordan eBay scores the winner for Liverpool. Meanwhile, they lost Philippe Coutinho and Dejan Lovren to hamstring injuries in the first half, so a bit of a problem there for Jurgen Klopp. Today, Everton and Man City in their first leg semifinal. College star and Seattle Sounders Academy product Jordan Morris will turn professional. This is per a release from Stanford University, where he played his college soccer. Despite his amateur status, the 21-year-old Morris already has 7 senior caps for the U.S. men's national team under Jurgen Klinsmann. He's expected to sign a homegrown contract with the Seattle Sounders, where he played his academy soccer and where his father is a team doctor. This is reportedly the richest homegrown offer in league history, but Morris is currently in Germany training with Werder Bremen, likely at the behest of Jurgen Klinsmann. So there may be some options available to Jordan Morris. That saga goes on. We will wait to see what his decision might be, but I actually expect in the end he'll sign with the Sounders. All right, here we go. This is gonna be a good one. Get yourself ready. First up, Jonathan Tannenwald, the goalkeeper, Philly.com, Peter Novak versus the Philadelphia Union. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
Here we go, back on Soccer Morning. One of the more interesting developments late last night on Twitter in American soccer was the sudden appearance of a bunch of documents through the Twitter feed of one Jonathan Tannewald, who joins us now from Philly.com. All of these documents related to the lawsuit Peter Novak has filed against the Philadelphia Union for wrongful termination. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm enjoying the musical interlude here.
That song is called Joyride. I don't think Peter Novak's time with the Philadelphia Union was such a thing. John, just okay. First of all, let's paint the background very briefly, because I think some people might be surprised there's a lawsuit because it's taken so long to get to this point.
All right, this lawsuit was originally filed back in 2012. In fact, right on the eve of the Major League Soccer All-Star game, which coincidentally happened to be in Philadelphia. And the crux of it is that Peter Novak sued the Philadelphia Union for wrongful termination, believing that he was owed money on his contract, that he was not paid.
Okay.
And this has gone back and forth and back and forth. And within Novak's contract, which is now a matter of public record, it states that basically the short form of it, and there's like thousands and thousands of pages of this thing, so apologies if I take my time a little bit trying to shorten some of these things. Just about everything possible within this contract, if there's a dispute, has to be settled by binding arbitration. But there was a clause in the contract which allowed Novak to basically sue the team, seek legal relief or equitable relief if he wanted to. So that's what he did. Okay. And this whole back and forth for years now has been the union trying to say this should be decided by an arbitrator, and Novak and his attorneys trying to get it into a federal court. And it was already once tossed out of federal court and sent back to the arbitrator. The arbitrator ruled against ruled against Novak. They appealed. The arbitrator ruled against Novak again, and they've appealed again. So this thing is technically still open, which is why the team hasn't said that much about it.
Right. So the union, for their part, in light of these revelations, can't really do a whole lot in terms of addressing them publicly because the lawsuit remains open.
And also the fact that the two of the key players, arguably the two key players,
are no longer with the team.
Three technically. Diego Gutierrez, Peter Novak, and Nick Sakevich. And almost all of the supporting actors, as it were, are no longer with the team either. John Hackworth is gone. Rob Vertusian is gone. The ones who are left are the head trainer and two of the owners, Dave DeBuscher and Jay Sugar.
So we come to, again, to sort of go over everything that was revealed in these documents is nigh impossible. Again, go check out Jonathan's Twitter feed for some of it, including images that he uploaded there to the internets for your reading pleasure. But John, some of this stuff, I mean, again, let's remember that this is Novak suing the union. At this point, it then becomes the union's responsibility when responding to say, well, here are the reasons he was fired. And if I don't have this wrong, and we'll get into some of the details here that were revealed in a moment, but if I don't have this wrong, the problem, part of the problem that Novak has, or Novak's lawyers have pointed to, is that while he was fired for what the union say is cause related to several violations of league rules and the like, he ultimately says he was not allowed to respond to those. Is that what it is, or that he wasn't given a chance to apologize?
That's correct. That he wasn't given a chance to, a genuine chance to clean up his act.
Okay.
And the union basically said, no, we have the ability to fire you pretty much whenever we want for any reason. And the arbitrator said, yeah, the union are right.
Okay. I mean, again, this seems like very shaky ground for Peter Novak to be standing on. I just wanted to establish that.
I don't want to say that directly because I'm trying to be the impartial observer in this, but everybody in the legal community who I've talked to has told me that Novak is on shaky ground here.
Yes. Okay. Now let's come to, again, let's put this all into the realm of, I don't know how to say this. I mean, we have no reason to doubt that these things happened. They are included in the lawsuit with testimony from several different parties involved.
But except I want to cut you off there.
Okay, go ahead.
I wouldn't go so far as to say we have no reason to doubt any of this, because everything that came out last night came out from filings made by the two sides who were trying to establish their different sets of facts.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, again,
and this is why everybody was jumping on me last night about John Hackworth's role in this.
Okay.
Because one of the statements from Novak's side said that John Hackworth and Rob Vartusian filmed one of the hazing activities that Novak performed upon his players. And I could barely even read through some of that stuff with a straight face, so apologies in advance to the listeners. But it's all out there. I tweeted it last night. And I sat and some number of people saying, well, U.S. Soccer has to answer this because John Hackworth, blah, 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 on. And yes, John Hackworth probably has to say something about what happened. But in reading this, I'm sitting there thinking, this is Novak's side of the story. There's no mention of what Hackworth's perspective in the moment was my boss asking me to do this.
Right.
I can't really say no when he's really angry. I don't know if there was any coercion or whatever. I don't know if there was or wasn't any coercion. But Hackworth is innocent until proven guilty. Especially when the assertion here was not a statement of fact, but by a statement by one side in the case.
Look. So a lot of this is amounts to. He said. It's one side versus the other. So let's just point that out, especially stuff like, again, Hackworth's involvement, and I even have directly on my feed 2 minutes ago, as somebody listening to us here this morning, John says, what do you think U.S. Soccer will think of their new U17 coach condoning videotaping and showing hazing of young men?
Condoning is the wrong word.
We don't know any of that necessarily. And again, what we've got though is when it comes to Novak directly, is again I'm going to call them allegations because for the time being, I think that's what we have to do, John.
Most of it are allegations. A fair amount of it at this point has been established as fact. And what I would say is I want to use your phrase, pull back the curtain here for just a moment on a couple of things in this. One is that I've been waiting a long time, as many people have, for last night to happen. For most of the history of this case, all of this information was under seal by order of the arbitrator and a previous judge in the court. The judge changed, and the new judge came along and said, in essence, I don't see why all of this stuff has to remain sealed and off the record. And so in a ruling in the middle of December, he said, both sides wanted to keep this stuff under seal. The union wanted to keep this stuff under seal because they didn't want all the embarrassing details about themselves to get out.
Sure. That this stuff all happened on their watch.
Everybody's innocent in this thing.
Yeah. I mean, all of this happened. Let's regardless of whether or not you want to put, say Peter Novak comes off as the bad guy here, and in a lot of cases, these allegations he does, or some of this stuff that happened, he certainly does. The team allowed this to happen, and then there comes. Let's before we get to what the union did at one point, despite evidence that Novak was doing things he probably shouldn't have been doing. Let's just go through a couple of these things. You don't have to address them all directly, John, but I think it's interesting to list some of these revelations. This is all. I'm actually using the Reddit thread on this story because somebody actually helped us out by putting all of these things into individual notes.
I haven't even had time to write up a proper story yet.
No, of course. Novak denying players collectively bargained vacation days. I mean that's the least of these these allegations. Denial of water on a 10 to 12 mile run in 2012, during which Novak physically took the bottles from the trainer and threw them in the bushes, forcing injured players to participate, which is obviously beyond the scope of the CBA and just a wrong thing to do in general. An unnamed player traded 2 weeks after telling the Players Association or Players Union about some of the things that Novak was doing, so a retaliation.
Right.
Go ahead.
And that's I want to stop on that one real quick. That's a bit. People were asking me last night why that is a big deal. It's pretty fundamental when you're in a labor union, that you have an ability to complain anonymously to your union about unsafe or unfair working conditions.
It's protecting whistleblowers in general, but specifically
Right.
in this labor situation, absolutely. If you don't have the freedom to say what's happening, then no one's ever going to get called out for
and Novak's side in their arguments kept saying, well, we don't know who actually did this, and nobody's willing to come forward and say they did it, therefore we can't prove it. And as the arbitrator rightly went back to them, no, this is a fundamental part of collective bargaining and labor law. Stop it.
Yeah, so right. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, to try to stand on this. Well, this is not one of those situations. The laws or the rules of the courtroom do not apply in this dynamic. You do not have the right to face your accuser when you are management and they are labor.
Right.
Yes. All right. So we have that one. We have Novak making light of this was a big one last night, and obviously several big figures in American soccer took note of this one. In fact, I think Taylor Twellman commented that he had heard Novak say this before. Novak making light of the fact that players said they had concussions, saying that they didn't exist, that in Germany you take a pill and you play, failing to comply with league rules by creating an atmosphere where players felt they needed to hide concussion symptoms. I mean, it speaks directly to what you're talking about, John. If a player thinks his playing time and therefore perhaps his bonuses or his salary is going to be damaged by a coach who's going against collectively bargained rules or league rules for that matter, what motivation does he have to speak out and go back to his union or to the league to express these concerns?
And this was before, the salaries were where they are. We're talking 2011, 2012 here. And, this was before the salaries jumped up to where they are now. So the salaries my point being that the guys are making even less money than they are now. I want to note one other thing. There's a very important reason why there are no players named in all of the players' names in the. Oh, by the way, that reminds me, the 714 pages. Right, Jason? You there?
Yeah, John. I don't know what's going on. It seems like maybe Novak's side is trying to block the.
Well, sorry.
We've got
I have in my hand the 714 pages of paper.
Okay.
But I promised the sound effect I would drop on my desk. So here goes.
All right. It's a lot of paper, a lot of dead trees. We're still killing trees in the modern age when it comes to lawsuits specifically. Just a couple of things. I'll run these down pretty quickly. Not all of these are quote unquote big deals, although they are certainly violations of rules that Novak knew were in place. He played trial. Go ahead.
Finish my one quick thought.
Yes, go ahead.
When the judge ordered all of this stuff to come out, he said the only things that will be redacted are names or identifying information of the players, including, quote, the minor involved in a hazing incident, end quote, which means that somebody at the time was under 18.
Well, I think we could all do the math there.
Yeah, I did. And two, quote, evidence of the substance and communications between any players and the Major League Soccer Players Union. Everything else was published. The rest was redacted. That's why the names are off the record. I named two players in one very limited circumstance last night, which was Novak playing players in friendlies for which tickets were sold, and therefore they made money off of, who were academy players and not signed by the team and thus not part of the players union. That was a violation of the CBA. It happened twice in 2011. And Novak basically, the first time it happened was in a game against Everton. The player was Christian Hernandez. I know that because he's the only academy player who played the game.
Mm-hmm.
Todd Durbin, who everybody knows is an executive at Major League Soccer, spoke with Peter Novak. Novak said he knew it was a violation for the unsigned player to play. He did it anyway. So they said don't do it. They did it again with Jimmy McLaughlin in the subsequent game against Real Madrid.
Oh, he didn't care.
57,000 people to Lincoln Financial Field. They made a ton of money off of. Then they played a trialist in a exhibition game against Harrisburg, which
also violation.
There were tickets for, so they made some money off of. Novak, and I'm going to read here from the case filing, spoke with Todd Durbin and informed him that he understood it was a violation for the unsigned player to participate in the gated exhibition game, but he decided to play the player anyway. He also informed Mr. Durbin that he disagreed with the rule and would do it again. Because of this, Don Garber fined the union $25,000. The union reduced the fine to $15,000 through negotiation with the league, because what could they do?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
The other $10,000 was held in abeyance in case there were future violations. And this is a point that I've been trying to follow up on with the team, which in general with this stuff is very helpful with me. But this is one that needs to be followed up on over the course of the next few days. Quote, furthermore, within the Philadelphia Union organization, the team manager is responsible for the signing of all homegrown players. In this regard, on or about May 1st, 2012, the league concluded that the Philadelphia Union violated the league's homegrown player rule and sanctioned it as followed. 1, loss of $75,000 in allocation money. 2, a $35,000 fine payable immediately. And 3, should the player be transferred, and I don't know who this player was, which is a determination that will now solely be made by the league will retain 2/3 of the transfer revenue, with the Philadelphia Union only receiving 1/3.
Huh. Wow.
Now, both of the players in question both of the academy players who they were sanctioned for using, Christian Hernandez and Jimmy McLaughlin, are no longer with the Philadelphia Union.
Right.
Maybe they weren't good enough, but that set off all manner of alarm bells with me last night.
Yeah, there was another set of alarm bells that went off regarding the testimony about from Shep Messing regarding his conversations.
I laughing when I saw that.
Yeah, with Peter Novak. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, Peter Novak and Shep Messing, and this is a little bit of news to me, are apparently very tight. And
Shep Messing and Sikevich have been very tight.
okay, Shep has been in American soccer circles for quite some time. He's one of those guys. He close to figures within the union, may have even been the guy to suggest to Sikevich that he hire Peter Novak.
Which wouldn't surprise me, and I've heard that before because, again, when Sikevich ran the Metro Stars, Messing was around there all the time. It's fine. There's nothing per se wrong with that. It's the rest of the stuff that was a problem.
So at one point in the documents that you put out last night, John, and I think timeline obviously matters here, there's Shep Messing testifying to a conversation he had with Peter Novak, in which Peter Novak talked about how broke the union were, he needed to get out of Philadelphia, and that they hadn't paid their expansion fee. Can we go to that detail, and you give me some background there?
Yeah, and then after that, we'll go to the stuff about Messing trying to help Novak get other jobs.
Okay.
Okay. The conversation took place according to sort of an aggregation of filings by both sides at a U.S. Open Cup game at Red Bull Arena in 2011. Now, there was only one U.S. Open Cup game at Red Bull Arena in 2011, as best I can tell, and the Union did not play in it. They did not have a game that day. I guess that Novak might have just gone up to New York to meet with Messing or something like that. The Red Bulls were playing, New York FC or some amateur team. FC New York, I think it was called. At which time, according to Messing, Novak went off on this rant about how the Union didn't have any money. And that included the fact that as of that point in time, they had not in full paid the franchise fee for joining, which it was later. I first thought that was their expansion fee for joining the league. That was okay. Here it is from Novak's filing. I have to get the quote was, "I have to get the hell out of Philly." Mr. Novak claims in confidence, he told Messing, quote, "I have to get the hell out of Philadelphia. These guys are stupid. They don't know what they're doing, and they're broke. They have no money," end quote. And then in Novak's side's filing, if Mr. Novak actually said this, well, this was undoubtedly not Mr. Novak's wisest moment. The suggestion that it constitutes a material breach for which he could be terminated for cause without notice of the opportunity to cure, i.e. sue them, or cure his changes behavior, is unreasonable if not laughable. Furthermore, the concerns were at the time justified. The team had not and could not pay its required franchise fee. It was reasonable for any employee to be concerned about their security and future. I immediately called the union's the team's head of PR when I saw that. Try to get a clarification on there. I'm going to thank Chris Winkler publicly on here because it was very helpful to me last night. He took every single one of my phone calls, no matter how late they were, and tried to help me out. Now, it was I flagged that, tweeted it. It caused a stir. It was quickly pointed out to me by, of all people, our friend Maxi Rodriguez. that at that point in time, it wasn't really anything new for MLS expansion teams to pay their franchise fee in installments, which makes lots of sense.
Right.
So the team got back to me fairly quickly and noted that they basically had a plan, a payment plan set up with MLS, which they adhered to, and they paid the thing as they were supposed to.
Okay.
But the could not was the interesting phrase to me and lots of other people. And that's something that will take a while to dig into, but at the same time, it was 4 years ago now.
Well, sure. John, just to establish it, are we talking about the expansion fee, which in a recent context we hear is $100 million for NYCFC? It certainly wasn't for the Union, but $100 million for NYCFC. Are we talking about something else? Some sort of when you say franchise fee, what?
40. It was the expansion fee.
Okay, it was the expansion fee.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay, I don't know what other fee there would be.
What I was told. Let's see if I can get the exact quote up here. As agreed upon with MLS at the time of expansion, we were placed on a scheduled payment plan that we duly met.
Okay.
So I think Novak was trying to. Now look, the Union have never had a ton of money, and Nick Sakevich has never made any secret, at least when it suited him over the years, that he lost a lot of money personally.
Sure, and when we know Sugarman took a hit, and the team has, in terms of his holdings, and the team has not always been operating on the same level as some of the richer teams in the league. We knew that. We knew that there was some. I mean, this is why they have lagged behind in training facilities and the like.
But the idea of him. The idea of an MLS expansion team paying the entire expansion fee all in one check is a relatively new thing.
Okay, yes, and look, I mean, if you have if you're Sheikh Mansour, you have the money to write that check. Not everybody does. Philly came in.
I think LAFC is the other one.
Yeah, well, they took up a collection. They passed the hat around. Okay. So let's come to Shep Messing's role in trying to get Peter Novak. After probably being the guy that helped him get the Union job, now he's being asked to help him get another job, probably in Europe. And this is another reason, this is another element of the cause for which the Union have said that they fired Peter Novak.
Yeah, it was reported back at the time. I got a tip from a reporter in Scotland that Novak was chasing after, I think it was Hearts. Remember that?
Yeah, it rings a bell. Yeah, it rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. First of all, let's note that the Union paid U.S. Soccer $75,000 in order to buy Novak out of his contract as the head coach of the Olympic team. Okay. Thereafter, Novak, through Messing, then tried to get a job with U.S. Soccer while as the head coach of the Union, even though he was contractually barred from seeking other employment. So, thanks for that.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Well, and there seems to be the Novak position, the lawyer's position, seems to be resting on a very small.
Yeah, right. The technicality. The technicality is he didn't breach the contract because Novak didn't reach out to any of these clubs directly. He had intermediaries do it for him, to which the Union said, "No, come on." And the arbitrator pretty well agreed with them. And as I tweeted last night, what have we learned, class, about intermediaries in recent months in the sport of soccer around the world? Okay. Quoting from a filing by the Union's side of things. In April/May of 2010, before the start of the 2010 Men's World Cup in South Africa, claimant, Peter Novak, contacted Mr. Messing and told him that if the United States men's national soccer team did not do well in the World Cup, he wanted to take over for Bob Bradley as head coach. And the week after the loss to Ghana, Novak called Messing and asked Messing to speak to Sunil Gulati, president of U.S. Soccer, and see if claimant, again, all references to claimant here are Novak, could become the next head coach of the men's national soccer team, he wanted to take over for Bob Bradley in this regard, who was still under contract with U.S. Soccer at the time. Although he was reluctant to, Mr. Messing did in fact reach out to Mr. Galati on claimant's behalf, specifically notifying Mr. Galati the claimant was interested in Bob Bradley's position.
John, we're running rapidly out of time here. We got to get to the other big story, the situation with the Rochester Rhinos here in a couple minutes with Brendan Doherty. But I do want to put a bow on this, or I sort of want to wrap this thing up with the revelation, with the other revelation for me that was, well, it's not a revelation. It's public knowledge, but it's in opposition to everything we've just learned and everything we just went through and the timeline of some of these things, and it's more properly laid out through your Twitter feed and some of the things people have collated, and I know you'll be writing this up. The union gave him an extension that would have only expired at the end of 2015, so a week ago.
Right.
What on earth? What on earth?
Well, here's how I'd put a bow on this in two things. One, I hope Shep Messing is enjoying the MLS Cup ring that Novak got him in 2004.
Yeah, by the way, I have some concerns about Peter Novak's time in D.C. If this is what he was doing in Philadelphia, obviously he wasn't brand new to these ideas of player treatment, and he had a 14-year-old Freddie Adu in his team back then.
As the filing states, there was only one other instance in which the MLS Players Union asked the league to put into place a confidentiality agreement relative to a league investigation into misconduct of any kind. That other instance involved Novak during his tenure as the head coach of DC United.
Oh my God. I don't.
Okay, so here's my bow on this, and then you can rant as much as you like, because I know I got to get out of here too.
Okay, go.
I started doing this as a way of trying to figure out what was really going on with the union, because they were, in Nick Sakevich's tenure, till the very final days of it, a very secretive organization in a lot of ways. And everything that I have posted about in the course of this, covering this lawsuit, is on the public record. And, when I was guest hosting your show on the day that Sakevich got fired,
yes,
I mentioned on air that he threatened to sue me for libel at one point. And the reason why he threatened to sue me for libel was that I was investigating a story that was related to, not directly in, but related to this case, that came out of this case and things that were learned from it. Sakevich made himself look pretty decent in this, but he certainly was no saint, especially given Novak's allegations that he pre-approved and condoned afterward the hazing activity in question. But this whole thing on my part was a way at trying to bring some of the union's goings on into light in the public, and to explain to people behind the scenes why it is that some of these folks, So Sakevich in particular, I'll say it, Sakevich in particular, and I used to have a lot of respect for Novak. I don't anymore, obviously, but that a lot of these guys, the fans needed to know about what they were really going on and what was really going on, and if they so chose, to hold the team to account and get some better leadership in, so that this team can fulfill its potential and what it ought to be for MLS.
Well, look, I mean, the silver lining, the good thing here, as Philadelphia Union fans process all of this, as you go through 700 pages of documents, is that there is new leadership, that Ernie Stewart's on board, that there does seem to be a new dawning. There's actual investment in some of the infrastructure elements for the Union. I don't know that it means they're going to be a better team next year, John, but it definitely means that there's the specter of the Sakevich Novak era can be kind of washed away.
Oh, I sure think so. And look, I think the union as an organization will say, look, one of the reasons why we don't have much to say is because it's all in the past, and I get that. I wish they'd clear some of these things up, but it is in the past. Yeah. And they can move on now.
Yeah, but go ahead.
It's I'm not a fan of the team. People know that, but I certainly have been a fan of Ernie Stewart for a long time, as a lot of us have been. Even the world famous Eric Winaldo, who sometimes disagrees with things that MLS does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We shall see how this goes with the Union. I got to run, John. More stories to cover. Again, everybody follow the goalkeeper. Read John's stuff in relation to this case. He's been, as he says, been waiting on this for years, and we finally have some details out. John, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Pleasure as always.
There goes Jonathan Tannewell. Good stuff from him. Stepping aside, we'll come back. We'll focus in on Rochester, USL, Rhinos ownership being ousted. Brendan Doherty from the Bet Musket will join us. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Welcome to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
All right, we are back on Soccer Morning. We have wrestled with technology, and we've won for the time being. We'll see how long it holds. Brendan Doherty joins us now, writes at the Bent Musket for SB Nation, covering the New England Revolution. He also does a podcast called The USL Show, which covers the USL. We've got USL news today. Oh, Andy's from Rochester, New York. Hi, Brendan.
Hey, Jason.
So it's not a fun time to be a Rochester, New York soccer fan in light of the news that the USL has stripped the franchise rights from owner Rob Clark and is looking to shift the ownership of the Rhinos. At least there's that. I mean, this isn't a team that's dropped off the face of the planet yet. This can't be good.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've only had a couple months to bask in the glory of lifting the USL trophy, going the whole season, losing one game, having the best defense in the league. I mean, breaking goal scoring records in the league. I mean, the 2015 season was outrageous. It was classic hard-nosed defense wins championships, Rochester soccer. And just a few months after that, this news breaks last night, and it's not necessarily all doom and gloom, but it does throw a wrench in any optimism and hope for the time being.
All right, so at the current situation right now, first of all, how long has Rob Clark been the owner of the Rhinos? Because we know this is a club that goes back, into the 90s at the very least, and has a pretty long history in relative American soccer terms.
Yeah, Rob Clark took over in March of 2008, ahead of the 2008 season, and he was the second ownership group. The first ownership group, which had wrestled multiple times with whether to join MLS or not, and when to join MLS, and how much they wanted to play their hand if they wanted to join MLS. And that's, you could write a book about that alone. But that original ownership group racked up $10.6 million of debt, and $2.1 million of that was held by a Utica bank called Adirondack Bank, which Rob Clark's dad happens to sit on the board of directors at the time. So it made sense for Rob Clark at the time, who, before that, he had formed a holding company, Adirondack Sports Club LLC, and was trying to, figure out how to buy a lower division sports franchise, probably closer to Utica, where, he lived and he still lives. But, having the holding company in place already, and knowing that they were probably going to take a loss on the $2.1 million they were owed by the original Rhinos ownership group, Rob Clark stepped in ahead of the 2008 season and shelled out $2 million of his own money at the time to buy the team. At that time, the then mayor, Rob Duffy, and a bunch of important city council members, they were all on board. They were at the big ceremony. They were singing the praises of the Rhinos and how much the Rhinos meant to the city and how excited they were to work with Clark. But that excitement wore off pretty quick.
This is again a team with a pretty strong legacy. They used to be the Raging Rhinos. Why you dropped the Raging, I don't know, Brendan. Maybe we could talk about that. But again, 1996 founding, 99 U.S. Open Cup winners, last non-MLS team to lift that trophy. The building of a soccer-specific stadium outside of the MLS environment was pretty notable. When did that stadium get built?
The stadium opened in 2006. Plans were made well in advance of that. There were, delays at every step of the process. Even allocating money for somebody to survey land and create a study on the effective use of land in the city. So it didn't open until 2006, which was before Rob Clark took over. So a lot of the sticking points of how much exactly Rob Clark owes the city in taxes and who's responsible for which pieces of maintenance with the stadium, they tend to go back to before Clark took over. And when Clark took over, he said that his intention was to basically buy the stadium off of the city. The city owned the stadium at the time. His plan stated publicly was for the city to continue to operate the stadium, the venue, for the 2008 season. Then after that, he was going to somehow find some other investors, and with naming rights to this hot property, was going to basically buy control of the stadium away from the city. And then that was supposed to happen by 2009. And 2015 just ended, and the city still owns the stadium.
Well,
so that never came together.
Is there a reason? I mean, there's a reason. Obviously, look, Rob Clark has said that he lost a bunch of money running this team. That comes as no surprise to anybody who's been paying attention to American soccer, especially at the lower level, for a long time. I mean, we've got a top division that is quote unquote thriving and is still probably in the red overall. So this is not a surprise. But why did that not come to fruition? And ultimately, is he contesting any of the things that are now happening in USL's decision?
I don't really think so. I think he's been looking for an out for a while because, honestly, who wants to lose $400,000 a year and have to drive 3 hours, on the thruway on Interstate 90 in upstate New York to go to a game? And I mean, in recent seasons, the team hasn't been good. After Bob Billy left, after the 2011 season, the Rhinos brought in Jesse Myers, who is a longtime assistant coach at Richmond Kickers. And even though he made it to a penalty shootout in the USL semifinals at the time, lost to, I think, Charleston Battery, his second season, 2013, was abominable. It was just awful. It was the worst season in franchise history. At that time, I think 18 years. It was the first time the team never made the playoffs. The Rhinos were about 5 minutes away from being the only team that year to drop points to Antigua Barracuda FC.
Yeah.
That was a team that played that entire season on the road because nobody wanted to fly down to Antigua. So they played the entire season on the road. They regularly lost games 5-0. They lost a game, I think, 7-0 to another expansion team down in Florida that didn't last over a year. So that Rhinos team was awful. And this year, Rob Clark made appearances at the games. He had his luxury suite box right next to the press box, so it was real easy to check if he was there or not. But he was there, I want to say, every single game, except the bad weather games where he didn't want to drive through torrential downpour, 3 hours from Utica to Rochester. But I mean, he was there. He was excited about the games. It was his plaything. You talk about wealthy businessmen taking over sports franchises. The Rhinos were Clark's successful plaything in the 2015 season. And he was excited about it, but the fans really soured on Clark a long time ago. And they don't want an owner who is happy in the privacy of his own luxury box when the team is, far and away the best team in the league. The fans want an owner who is excited, who goes down and meets with the fans. Sacramento Republic's owner, got into the supporters section and was singing along with the supporters group.
Yeah.
Arizona United's owner, Kyle Eng, is on Twitter all of the time, and he engages with fans at the game, and he engages with anybody, including pro rel trolls and NASL trolls all the time on Twitter. And Rob Clark, in that respect, was kind of an absentee owner, and I guess that's a bit of a silver lining for fans, that if a deal is reached, things could get better.
Okay. There are a lot of details here in this particular case, and I'm going to talk to, I believe it's Tom Veet, the chief marketing officer for USL. By the way, former Philadelphia Union executive, which is interesting considering our last topic. On my Sirius XM satellite show today, Brendan. So I'll get into a little bit more of what's happening on the ground in Rochester. But before I run out of time with you, I do want to take this a little bit bigger picture as a guy who looks at USL as a whole. And we've obviously seen some massive changes. I mean, this all goes back to the TOA and the split between the USL and NASL owners back in 2009, 2010, I think is when that happened, if I remember correctly.
And if I can cut in, Rochester initially left USL after they initially committed to come back for the 2010 season. Then they decided to leave. So in December of 2009, USL actually filed a lawsuit against Rochester Rhinos and 2 other teams for breach of contract. And then after the weird hybrid 2010 season, Rochester abandoned the NASL project and went back to USL.
Partly
But
because, my understanding, partly because of cost and the amount of money that was going to be necessary to run an NASL team versus a USL team.
right. And Rob Clark has always been looking for ways to cut costs. There was a story that came out in the Democrat and Chronicle, the local paper, a while ago, where every employee that worked game night at Rhinos games was responsible for 2 or 3 or 4 different tasks. Like before pregame, you would take tickets. During the game, you would go around empty trash cans. After the game, you would clean bathrooms. I think either the GM, Pat Erkley, or Rob Clark, I can't remember, was even quoted saying, like, after the games, they clean up trash from the luxury suites. So like everybody was putting in a big team effort just to cut costs, and apparently it didn't work because Clark was still losing up to $400,000 a year.
The economics of lower division sports and lower division soccer specifically are tough. Coming back to, again, that split and the way that things went in American soccer, and then obviously coming to this moment, USL has changed, and USL ultimately decided to partner with MLS and become a de facto MLS reserve division, in addition to having these independent teams. Rochester, Richmond, obviously Sacramento's new, but has been a massive success. We've seen there are a couple of other teams in that group. And there's a question I have here. I'm not going to get his name right, but I'm going to say Peifler. C. Peifler on Twitter wants to know, he says, obviously USL taking over the Rhinos. Austin has shut down operations, which I read in your article at Bet Musket and hadn't caught up on.
Yeah.
Austin has shut down operations for 2016 because of how much money they lost in USL in 2015. Is there a threat to the independent clubs, the Harrisburgs, the Rochesters, the Richmonds, the Austins in USL in light of how everything is kind of playing out?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Austin just lost an unfathomable amount of money. They had a $2 million operating budget, and they went over that by $1 million. And before the season kicked off, they offered any player that they had under contract in preseason to any other team in USL, no questions asked, for free transfer for any player they had under contract, because they were so far over budget even in preseason. But with the new ownership groups coming into USL, the Linder family for FC Cincinnati, Indiana Pacers owner Herb Simon, who's going to run the Reno team that enters the league in 2017, and then the San Antonio Spurs Sports and Entertainment Group owning the San Antonio team. And it looks like the direction the league's going is, unless you're like an MLS2 team, you need to have just a filthy rich ownership group. The Aztecs looked like they were a solid organization. They had run. They were a professional team before that team franchise relocated to Orlando, and then they were a PDL team a successful PDL team for a few years before they made the jump to USL. So you would think that organization would have their stuff together, but they lost in like $1 million in one season. So you look at teams like Wilmington. Wilmington has had to take a hiatus before because they didn't want to waste money on a season that they didn't think was going to work out for them. Charlotte Eagles took a drop down to the amateur PDL because they didn't want to their structure as a Christian mission based soccer team couldn't handle the rising costs of competing in the new USL.
Yeah.
And you look at teams like Charleston, teams like Richmond, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Richmond, Charleston, Rochester been around for 20 years. So if the league's not afraid to play hardball with a team that's been around for 20 years, that has won titles in several different variations of second and third division soccer, that lifted a title just a few months ago. What is that going to do? What does that say to other long-standing USL teams.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the trouble here. I got Dell on Twitter. He's saying hoping for news on my USL team, the Charleston Battery. No news about players or preseason. So that's I mean it's fairly early. It's still the first week of January, but these things get ramped up pretty quickly. Season probably started in April. So there's got to be some sort of movement, at least when it comes to signing players in the league. The Battery, the Battery are 93 established. So Richmond 93, Rochester 96. I think Wilmington, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg. I'm trying to think of who else is independent. Obviously Sacramento. There's a couple other teams. There's some new independent teams as well. With I think Colorado Springs, technically independent. Oklahoma City, technically independent, I believe. And they're completely now that they're disconnected from Sporting, who has their own second reserve team in the league. So we'll see. To just kind of wrap this up, Brendan, before we move on here, what do you think is the ultimate outcome in Rochester? And do you I mean, are we talking about the Rochester Rhinos playing soccer in 2016?
Oh, I think that's definitely still on the cards because the league's tension with Rob Clark was the fact that Rob Clark didn't want to do what the city wanted. Rob Clark didn't want to play ball with the city and pay the back taxes. The city had already allocated the funds to repair the field conditions, to repair the video board, and the city employees interviewed by Jeff DeVeronica at the Democrat and Chronicle, who's covered the Rhinos since '96. City employees told Jeff that they would definitely be willing to actually follow through with the repairs with a different Rhinos ownership group.
Okay.
I mean, the city doesn't want to have nobody playing at Salem Stadium. They would rather have a primary tenant, a men's professional soccer team, as the primary tenant at Salem Stadium, rather than have it sit empty for a majority of the summer.
Sure.
I mean, the Western New York Flash, the professional women's team, plays there. There was a lacrosse team playing there. High school sports play there. There's some concert there over the summer. But the city would much rather have, a stable primary tenant there. And now that Rob Clark's gone, whenever financial agreement is reached between a prospective new owner, the league, and the city, I think everybody wants the deal to happen. So I think it's likely that a deal happens. And the team has 10 players under contract already. Mm-hmm. The team is keeping all of the staff in place, according to the league's press release. So despite the shocking news last night, everything is still tentatively scheduled as business as usual. The Rhinos traditionally start training camp the last week of February. They would have already started some open tryouts, and then they have a series of invitational combine type tryouts, and then training camp starts the last week of February. Preseason starts in March. So there's not that much time to get a deal done, but I think that the league and the city, especially the Tom Veit and other league employees, are coming up to Rochester to really put a lot of effort into making a deal happen.
Yeah, this is the big guns. They've sent in I've used this analogy before in other soccer circumstances, but we'll call Tom Veit the fixer, the wolf here. He's going to come in and fix things. At least that's the goal, I imagine. We'll move on here. We'll see what happens in Rochester. Certainly want to see the Rochester Rhinos continue to be a part of the American soccer scenes. Again, a longer history than most, especially when it comes to lower division soccer. And fascinating to me, Brendan, and I don't know what memories you'll have of that situation, but I've long said that there's got to be a long form, behind the scenes, in-depth story to be written about how close Rochester came to MLS expansion back in the day.
Yeah, what I understand is that on 2 occasions, Rochester came within a week of joining MLS.
That is pretty quick. I mean, they're pretty close. That's about as close as you can get without it happening. Brendan Doherty, Bent Musket at SB Nation, talking New England Revolution, and in this case, talking Rochester Rhinos. Also, the USL Show, which you can follow on Twitter at the USL Show, and Brendan's on Twitter at Doherty Soccer. Brendan, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
There goes Brendan Doherty. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll briefly open up the phones. I don't have a whole lot of time today, but we'll get you in here on a Wednesday. Soccer Morning, WorldSoccerTalk.com.
Welcome to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
All right, here we are on a Wednesday. Briefly, phone lines are open, and I think we're going to get at least one caller in on today's program. So 2 guests means we get kind of full up, and these were very interesting topics today. The lawsuit, Peter Novak versus the Philadelphia Union, and the revelations therein, with Jonathan Tannenwald. That by itself is a killer show. Then we add in Brendan Doherty and the perspective on the situation with the Rochester Rhinos up in Western New York, and whether or not they can continue to be an ongoing concern. Again, I've said this. You guys have heard me, and I'm going to put this on a T-shirt one day if I can boil it down to a catchy phrase. The worst thing that can happen in American soccer is for a team to die. We need teams to live, to exist, to continue on, to keep those fan bases and grow them. Now, look, it's tough to run a team. It's tough to make money running especially a second division team in the United States of America, or third division in this case, I guess. I don't know what the solution is to those problems. More people caring about the sport, obviously, but how do you get there? I mean, that's the issue. Let's go to Aaron in Jersey. It's been a little while. Hey, Aaron.
Yeah, hi. I just got back literally last night from Europe. I was there for 3.5 weeks on vacation.
Did you take any football?
In Italy.
Yeah?
Absolutely. I saw Stuttgart match. I saw Florentina match at the end of middle end of December, and then a couple of German matches, and then I even saw some of their second division football, which was pretty cool. And where I was staying in Verona, there was a fifth division team literally right at the end of the block.
Nice.
So it was a lot of fun.
Well, now you're back in the United States where we don't care as much, Aaron. So
yeah, about anything like that. But so it was kind of sad to hear what's going on in Rochester, and really more to the point that basically USL is almost like this subprime mortgage picking ground, for MLS to kind of cherry pick. And I think that's really kind of part of the problem with the lower divisions, is that there just isn't any kind of superstructure, whether it's, the National Federation or MLS, which are the 2 biggest structures we have, that want to put any kind of, conditions or kind of energy behind it, except to kind of cherry pick franchises here and there.
We're working again. This is one of my continuing issues, and it's a question. It's not. I'm not taking a position here. I'm asking a question for you first. Do we want to operate from the position that soccer is supposed to be a multi-level situation, a la Europe, a la South America, where every town has a team and they're supposed to be at least somewhat, not if not profitable, then at least getting by, and that's a necessary part of being part of the soccer world? Or should we just go on what I think is a more modern approach, which is that, hey, to have 25 teams in a top division is pretty much what we do in this country. I mean, it's not like there's a minor league for American football. It's not like the D League is something anybody cares about. Minor league baseball is constantly changing teams and allegiances and names, and clubs are disappearing and coming back. I don't know. Aaron.
I mean, I guess where I think it's a little different in soccer, and I would say basketball is going to get there probably the second half of this century, as trust me, the basketball in parts of Europe is really good. I mean, some of it's scary good. And is that basically soccer, there's such a strong alternative set of choices to watch great or very good, that I think it's incumbent on any upstart. And we just happens to be the United States in this. And remember, we were an upstart in hockey too. I mean, so we've been in the upstart business in other sports that weren't our primary sports. And you do put some developmental structure in place. I'm not saying anywhere near the 50,000 divisions that England has or something crazy like that. But there is a choice between 0 divisions underneath you and England. And I think that choice is somewhere, and I actually don't think we're too far off. It's somewhere between 2 and 6, 7, so maybe 4 is probably the safe number. And by the way, football does have minor leagues. They're just allowed to make a ton of money on the athletes without paying them.
Well, sure, but I'm talking about the genesis of of that structure wasn't the notion that every town has a team that is part of you know what I'm saying. Okay,
absolutely,
it's a
absolutely.
It's a different starting point.
I'm not trying to play gotcha there. I'm just trying to be honest to say that development is incumbent in complex team sports, especially for these modern specialized roles where the ability to make a goalkeeper is just really hard, right? I mean, you need someone with the Gladwell 10,000 or maybe 10 times that hours in it. And I think you need these layers or else you always abort your kind of development. And the thing I would say is the real heart of it to me is that if owners want something out of this, because, San Antonio Spurs buy a team, but if the league isn't any good, then what are they buying in the end? I mean, they're going to flush $5-10 million down the drain and then not understand soccer because they think they're buying something good.
Yeah.
And then they're playing at a really poor level. The player quality just isn't there. They can't get the players in, et cetera. So I think at the end. And by the way, we had this before in American sports. We had this with football in the 1920s. It was horrible. I mean, professional football was a joke then. It was college football that was great. And it took a structuring to actually create a top division, which is basically what the NFL did or became. And I would just say that I think we're mature enough, I like to hope we are, that we could put some things in place here, that, and I don't mean some overarching crazy stuff, but I think a basic running your audit flash report every month, like here's your budget, you can't overspend it by 10%, or else you go on the red flash list.
Yeah.
And so that teams don't have a $2 million budget to spend $3 and implode. I mean, I think that's just weird.
Yeah,
you wouldn't do that in any other business.
I don't. I know U.S. Soccer has those ownership requirements in place, the standards. I don't know I don't know how they're applying in this situation in Rochester. I don't know. I mean, obviously Austin, again, taking a hiatus isn't good. I mean, again, we're coming to.
I mean, to me, it's weird that a USL team, which I've seen them play a few times, so I can't judge this. I'll bet they could beat some NASL teams, and so basically a USL winning team that could probably play in the NASL pretty easily is just like done or nowhere or kind of neutral sideways. I mean, that's just weird. I mean, it's kind of like, it's like those Italian scandals, in the decades in the past where a team would like match fixing and the whole thing would implode and they'd go down 5 divisions. I mean, I'm not saying that was good, but it kind of made sense. I mean, like everyone was throwing a match, but at least there was some justification behind it, and in this, it's just kind of like, I really don't want to buy my new Ferrari and pay the payments anymore. I mean, that just shouldn't, you shouldn't be allowed to have a club without a bond, without some insurance, without at least maybe another year's running operating expenses. And then if there becomes a problem, then you tap that, you run that club for another clean year, you put it under administration, and then basically, from there on, someone else buys it off or whatever.
We're talking about some, the structure of all of this. I mean, again, I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. I think there continue to be big questions about how we want to operate this thing, and I think for some people it boils down to, Aaron, I'm just going to wrap it up here because I do have to run.
Yep.
That it's whether or not soccer is exceptional, and we should be turning towards that direction, which makes it the European model or something approaching it. Again, soccer is exceptional in that it requires multiple divisions and movement between divisions, and this kind of approach, this kind of local tiered approach, et cetera, or America and American sports is exceptional, and really the way we are running this with most of our focus on a top division, and then the minor leagues are always going to be the Wild West, is actually the best and most pragmatic way to go.
And I think you nail it, in that the real challenge becomes how much money are we going to make and spend doing this, and what's the quality of what we're going to get out of the product? And over decades, is that quality going to,
Right.
demonstrably improve,
Yeah.
or is it going to be pretty static?
Yeah,
that's going to really be the heart of the test. And we can measure these things on coefficients, which I know we don't like to do because we don't like to do all these other types of things, champions and regional CONCACAF and all that stuff. But, I think it boils down to what kind of product do we really want here? And we've never really kind of said we want the best product. We just say we are the best product. What I mean?
Well,
I think because we're used to always having the best product.
Yeah, that sort of our isolation sort of resolved that issue for us without that question having to be asked. It's never had to be asked before, and yet here it is.
Except when we go in the World Cup. Or something like that.
Yeah.
And you know what? One thing I will say, last thing is, they love us over there, and just all these types of things we're really trying to do. I mean, they think it's remarkable. I had these great conversations where people would just say, the idea that we would get into ice hockey, like in Italy, and then just fight for decades to just, qualify for the Olympics. And,
right.
and it wasn't a crazy analogy because, we were in the north and it was friggin' cold up there. And, and it was like, yeah, you could play ice hockey here. I mean,
right.
easily.
Yeah.
And it was actually kind of an interesting way to think about it, which is, you're kind of imposing, or you're trying hard to, get some of our stuff and South American stuff and your own stuff,
right.
and stumbling through it. But we see you, and I'll tell you, they love Tim Howard. They think he is a god for that game he had against Belgium. I mean, that is like a big time game for them to view us in. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Aaron, I would love to hear more stories. I'm out of time. Maybe we can get you back on the air shortly, but I appreciate your call. Great to hear from you again. Thanks
Thank you.
All right, goes Aaron. Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting way to think about it. That as Americans, it is in our nature. At least this is what we're doing, to take ourselves out of our own little box and try to put ourselves in somebody else's box, if you want to look at it that way. Or we want to participate in everything, whereas the Italians and the Spanish and the Brazilians and the Germans and the Russians or whoever, generally speaking, keep themselves in their own box. They don't really they're not chasing the dream of becoming a top basketball power. I mean, maybe Italy is a little bit on that front. Certainly not doing American football. Certainly not doing baseball. I mean, when Italy participates in the World Baseball Classic, they have people like they have Americans who have Italian heritage. That's how that works. I mean, it's basically how we're building our soccer. Never mind. Let's wrap this up. Thank you very much for listening on a Wednesday, man. What a show. Jonathan Tannenwald, thank you to him. Thank you to Brendan Doherty for his insight as well. We will rush out of here. We got the Sirius XM show coming up. Tom Veit, we're going to check on that. From USL will join us there. See you then. Bye.